Gaining weight at this age in life, and I'm in my mid 40s, is very normal for women. And I was like, well, no, that's not okay with me. I just had this limiting belief that my genetics were working against me. I would literally be hiding in the pantry eating chocolate chip cookies because I didn't want my kids seeing me eat all these chocolate chip cookies. My scrub pants no longer fit. We had to get a life insurance exam. And for the first time in my life, my BMI was in the overweight category. My brother sent me workout videos for my birthday.
Oh,
And he was like,
God.
I got the dreaded phone call from my director at work who's like, Archana, we're getting complaints about how you're acting and stuff. And I was like, oh, isn't a quick fix. Because the thing about a quick fix is that it also leaves quickly, right? Like it doesn't last very long.
That's a good one.
And I'm happy to say I actually did get down to a weight, like I really didn't even think it was possible, like lower than the weight I was the day I got married 16 years ago.
Okay, awesome. Archana, take me back to about a year ago. What were some of the series of trigger moments for you to kickstart your journey with us at RNT?
Yeah. Well, so about a year ago, I mean, honestly, I signed up for RNT just like in December of 2022. And what had happened really was about 6 months prior to that, I had gone on a medication, like a hormonal birth control, that really caused my body to kind of feel out of control. Like I was just gaining weight for unclear reasons. Yet, I was told like, well, most people don't gain weight with this medication, but I was. And I was trying the normal things that had worked for me to kind of control my weight and keep it in the range that I liked to keep it in. However, the weight was just kind of kept creeping on and on and on. And I finally went to the OBGYN doctor, was seen by a nurse practitioner there. And I was like, I really just want to get off of this medication. And it is an IUD. So I needed a procedure to get it taken out. I couldn't just stop. And so, she took it out but she said, gaining weight at this age in life, and I'm in my mid 40s, is very normal for women. And, it's not considered a sign, anything abnormal. And I was like, well, no, that's not okay with me. And I don't want to accept that for my life. And I really was like, is it ultimately true that every single woman in their like perimenopausal phase of life always gains weight? And I mean, while you can find many examples of that, you can also find examples of people who don't and who do really well with maintaining their weight. And I was like, I want that to be true for me. I want that to be like, I don't want to just accept this as a blanket statement of like, this is just how life is going to go from here on out. And, I ended up kind of going online, looking at, for me, when I want to like bust a limiting belief, I like to look for examples of people who've done it, right? And use that as inspiration. I was like, yeah, there's so many women who have actually a better body in their 40s or 50s than they maybe did in their 20s and 30s. And I was like, that's going to be me. And I just kind of was like, that's what I want. I had always been someone who likes to exercise. I had already conquered stress and emotional eating earlier on in my life. So I knew that those really weren't the issues, that being a vegetarian, I needed to probably dial things in more with my nutrition. I needed to have more strategy with my training and exercise. And somehow I ended up on RNTs, or I got some kind of something in my social media from RNT. And I was like, oh my God, these transformations are amazing. And Akash, another big limiting belief I had being of Indian descent. And I was like, I just had this limiting belief that my genetics were working against me, that like I
Mm.
couldn't have that body, like the really strong physique that I'd always sort of wanted. I was like, well, it's just not possible due to my genetics. And so, but when I saw the RNT transformations, I was like, wait a minute, a lot of these people here are of Indian descent and they have like incredible transformations. And so that just was really mind blowing for me. And I was just like, okay, like that just threw that limiting belief out the window. And I was like, okay, well, obviously it's possible. And it's even possible for me. So those are some of the things that were kind of going on when I was like, okay, like now you've got this IUD out. Like, yes, you're going to need to lose that 20 pounds you gained from it. But like, how do you want to do it? And like, what is it that you want to have, you know? And so, of course, I could have probably lost the weight on my own, but I was like, I want to have body recomposition. Like, I don't want to just lose weight. Like, I want to. I felt like I had more muscle that just I always had muscle, but it just never showed because there was the extra layer of fluff on top. So I was like, I want that muscle to finally show through.
Amazing. You mentioned a few times around limiting beliefs that you had in your fitness journey, in your overall health. What where do you think these stem from for you personally? Because they seem to have held you back for so long in taking the right steps.
Yeah, yeah. I think the big one really was almost like from childhood of like, being of Indian descent and like, like we here, at least in the United States, like we are, I don't know, considered the model minority. Oh, like you're really good at your book smart, like really intellectual, but like not necessarily so gifted in the athletic department. Sports physique or whatever. It was sort of just a stereotype, and I think I had subconsciously just kind of bought into it to a degree. Although I personally had always considered myself an athlete. Like I played college tennis, I played high school tennis, college tennis. Um, I ran track. Like I had always been someone who enjoyed physical fitness. But like I think what the thing was that I would do those things, but I still never had like the really toned arms or like super flat, stomach or six pack abs or anything like that. And I think I just started to make that mean like, it's just not possible for me. No matter how much I do this, it's just not possible for my body to do that. And then I would kind of just look at my family and be like, okay, well, just genetically speaking, for example, like my father had yo-yoed with his weight a lot growing up. Like when I was growing up, I saw him do various different diets. And same with my mom. And so I think like a lot of those were really deep-seated things. As far as like menopausal weight gain goes, I mean, I think it's just like the stereotype, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, yeah, there are people who do have that, but then there are people who don't, like who take the right steps and don't end up gaining that weight, who start to learn that maybe in this time in life, I need to eat in a different way. I need to train in a different way. I need to prioritize different things and that it is possible, right? I think with the standard American diet, it's very common to just like have that weight gain. But if we start to educate ourselves and start to shift and eat in a different way, train in a different way, prioritize like, essentially our self-care, then it doesn't have to be, So I think a lot of those were just from growing up, from society, from, you know, those types of things, I guess.
You mentioned your parents had yo-yoed all throughout their lives, and this sort of their impact on you. What do you have any sort of memories of yourself potentially trying diets when you were young? And was this something that you grew up around and struggled with in the early days?
No, no. I mean, I actually had a really good healthy weight throughout my childhood, throughout my teen years. For me, what happened was like my weight was pretty well under control. Until I became a mom, really. And that's when things started to kind of go a little downhill. And I often talk about, so I'm an emergency physician, and I have two kids, and my kids are fairly close in age, they're about 2 years apart. And it was really after having kids that I kind of lost that time to really focus on myself, to exercise regularly, to prioritize like healthy nutrition, to get the sleep I needed, right? And plus, I was working this really chaotic schedule in the ER. So I would work evenings, nights, overnights, right? The holidays, like my schedule was always shifting. And if I have a really incredible husband, so he's been always so supportive, but it was like, I would do my first shift working in the ER, then come home to the second shift, which willingly I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to take care of my kids. I wanted to be present with them. I wanted to cook meals for them. I wanted to like plan the amazing birthday parties for them. And I did all of those things, but I never really prioritized my own wellness and fitness at that time. And plus I was experiencing burnout, from my job in the ER. So professional burnout. I was also experiencing what I call parental burnout. Cause like the job of being a parent, I'm sure, Akash, is 24/7, 365. Like you never get a break. Right. And so I turned to food, at that time to kind of neutralize all the negative emotions that I was feeling from that burnout and stress. And so, yeah, I was gaining weight, feeling like I was huffing and puffing, walking up the stairs, and felt really crabby too. And I was like, this is not the person I am normally. I don't want to show up this way for my family. I don't want to show up this way for my patients, for at work, with my team members at work. And so that was when my first ever journey really began, where I was like, I need to lose this weight. And so that was where I really started to address my stress and emotional eating. And I felt like I had really done well with that, conquered that, lost that weight. And so really did a good job maintaining my weight throughout much of that, and had finally set up like a good routine. But up until really this kind of happened back in 2022 with the medication that I was on, I felt like I had overall had a good weight. As far as like parents go, and seeing that, like it was in a way a motivator. Seeing my dad kind of struggle with his weight, I was like, okay, I need to be on top of this. There's a family history of diabetes as well. And I was like very turned off by yo-yo dieting. And I was like, always like, lifestyle solutions are so important. And that's why, like, even when I went through my burnout and wanted to lose the weight that I had gained there, I was like, I want to go and understand, like, why am I doing this? Why am I turning to food, and how can I address that? And so that's how I really dove deeper into that, and ended up, becoming a coach who helps others end stress and emotional eating and overcome burnout. And so that was really helpful in the career, in throughout all of this. And it actually even helped me further because I started to, on my RNT journey, start to realize like there are other levels of emotional eating besides stress, stress eating.
Yeah.
And I really had to kind of dive deeper into that. And it's been a really interesting journey to learn about those things too.
Well, amazing. A lot to unpack there. The first I want to ask is, you said when you reached this point of burnout, you were turning to food in this period. But before I dive into, I want to ask around how you help that. What I want to first ask around, how did you know you were in a state of burnout and that things needed to drastically change? Because being an emergency room doctor, is that right? ER
Yeah.
doctor? Emergency doctor on a crazy different rotating schedule of night shifts, plus having two young kids. I'm assuming they were under 5-6 years old at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a melting pot, right? So at what point did you realize enough was enough and you needed to do something about it? And when did those symptoms start creeping in of you started turning to food a little bit more? And at the first, you probably don't even realize it until, right, I need to change. Tell us about that process, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would literally be hiding in the pantry eating chocolate chip cookies because I didn't want my kids seeing me eat all these chocolate chip cookies. That was like my way of like, I'm not someone who drinks alcohol. I don't do drugs. But food seemed like a socially acceptable thing to turn to kind of neutralize these emotions. But I started to be like, why am I hiding in the pantry eating chocolate chip cookies? Like I obviously had shame around that too, that I didn't want my kids to see me eating this. And I was noticing that I was turning, like I'd get the kids to bed finally, and they were kind of difficult to get to bed at that age. And so it just felt like always a major accomplishment once they were finally both asleep. And so I would reward myself with like a bowl of cookie dough ice cream, And so I was like, where did this come from? I never used to do this before. But I also started to recognize like, no, actually I did do this in the ER. And many of us in the ER are stress eaters, right? Like whenever the emergency department would get busy, we would all of a sudden like donuts would appear and like pizza would appear. Like somebody would order it. And we would like between patients grab a slice of pizza or grab some donuts. And so really like that pattern, I realized when I really kind of went back and analyzed it, really did start in those years of like working in the emergency department. Like everybody was a stress eater, more or less. Like it was just like very normalized, you know, like they're like, oh, it's a crazy day. And they're like, oh, there's cupcakes in the back. There's brownies in the back. Go grab one, you know, like it was just so normal. And so, and I was like, oh, I didn't really think it was like a big deal. But then I started to see that obviously it was affecting my waistline. And so really like my rock bottom moments kind of came when like my scrub pants no longer fit, and I like the old school, like nowadays scrub pants are a little bit more fitted like with certain brands and stuff. But back then, like they were like super loose. It was like this drawstring, like, so for me to say like my scrub pants no longer fit, like it was kind of a rock bottom moment where I was like, dang girl, because those are like normally would hide a lot of the extra weight. And then my other rock bottom moment came when like we had the kids. So we are like, we need life insurance. And so we had to get a life insurance exam. And for the first time in my life, they weighed me, they did my BMI, and my BMI was like falling in the overweight category for the first time in my life. Like I said, up until then, like I had been pretty good with my weight. And so I was like, this is not like the third and final straw came when my brother sent me workout videos for my birthday.
Oh,
and he was
God.
like, these are for women.
Only your brother or sister can get away with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's my brother who likes to mess with me. He's like always been a joker.
Yeah.
These are for women who are getting older and who need to lose weight. And I'm like, thanks, bro. But I was like, you know what? He's right. Like, I do need to start on this and like make a change. And I think like even just like the burnout, like it became clear to me that it was burnout when I got the dreaded phone call from my director at work who's like, Archana, like we're getting complaints about how you're acting and stuff. And I was like, oh shit, like, I'm sorry. I hope you can delete
it's all
that.
good. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
I was like, and I'm usually like pretty happy person. I'm normally like get on great with people. Like I don't usually have problems like that. And I was like, this is like not me at all. And so it became like very clear in all these different ways, like you've kind of hit rock bottom, like you've got to address this. And, and coaching was the way. Like I ended up having a coach help me, and then now I pay it forward.
What was the investigation then for you into digging into why you stressy, why you emotionally? What were some of the questions you were asking yourself? What were some of your insights that you had? And then how ultimately did you address it?
Yeah. It's such a good question. I mean, so really what I started to realize was, like like I have a life coach certification, what we call it is buffering. So it is neutralizing an emotion, like turning to something outside of yourself to neutralize an emotion, right? So we have a feeling of stress, frustration, anxiety, whatever it is, a so-called negative emotion, and we start to want to, like, it feels uncomfortable. So we're like, well, what can I do to get out of this discomfort? And so, some people might turn to alcohol. Some people turn to social media. Some people turn to Netflix. Some people to shopping. But many people do turn to food as well, And so I was like, okay, well, I can eat these cookies and I'll feel like this little dopamine hit. And so, but the thing is, it doesn't actually take away the underlying stress, right? It doesn't take away the underlying anxiety, frustration, whatever it is, that emotion. And it just temporarily distracts you. It temporarily makes you feel better in that moment. And the other aspect of buffering is that it creates a net negative for you. And the net negative for me was that, and we know where buffering is that we create that net negative. So for me, it was like my weight wasn't where I wanted it to be. My energy wasn't where it wanted to be, right? I was not feeling confident about myself and my body. And, for those people who turn to maybe wine as their poison, it's sort of like pick your poison, right? Like, so those people who turn to wine, then like maybe it's that they're feeling hungover the next morning or their liver enzymes start to become abnormal over time, right? For those who turn to Netflix, like that was another thing I would do. I would have trouble waking up in the morning because I'd just binge watch like a bunch of shows when I was trying to go to sleep. And then next thing I know, it's like midnight and I have to be up at work at 6 a.m., So that was a net negative there. And plus I wasn't connecting with my husband or my kids during that time, instead I was just isolating and doing that. So that was really the net negative. But so what I had to really do was create awareness, of course, that this was the pattern and that this was what was going on. And, start to identify, okay, what are the emotions that I'm feeling really, that I'm trying to buffer away. And a lot of them were like stress, overwhelm, exhaustion. And so I had to learn how to process emotions, and like learn how to process them without, and just really sitting with feelings. Cause the thing is that life is 50-50 for all of us, right? Like no single person in this world has only positive emotions, right? We all experience the full spectrum of both positive and negative emotions. And so I think like step one was like the awareness. Step two was like, hey, like nothing has gone wrong here that you're feeling a negative emotion. Like this is, because I think in our society today, like we're almost taught to believe like we should never feel like sad. We should never feel anxious. We should never feel frustrated, stressed, disappointed, whatever. That's a problem to feel those things. And it's not like, it really isn't. So I think like that was the next step. And then number three was really like learning how to process emotions and process through them. So it took many different kind of, it took time. It wasn't something that just happened overnight. It took practice, just like anything else. Just like you can't just build biceps overnight. Like you have to keep showing up at the gym, keep trying, keep getting better. But like, the more and more you learn to process your emotions and like allow yourself to sit with them and actually just feel them, the better. And so as a parent, I think like you'll see, I mean, I know your daughter's quite young, but like, I started to see like, hey, my kids, they'll go through these different emotions, right? And it's like, they're like angry, and then like, it just passes through. And then all of a sudden they're like back to normal and they're happy again, right? So it's just a feeling and we just have to feel it and let it pass through. And feelings are all temporary and it's okay to experience them. And even yesterday, I was telling my son this because he had a basketball game and he was all frustrated and disappointed and angry that they lost. And I was like, okay, it's all right. Like feel those emotions, just feel it. Like,
Yeah.
and then that's actually the fastest way through it. Like feel the emotion. And as you feel it, like, and then I just let him sit there in the car, feel it, didn't say anything. And then, after a couple minutes, 5 minutes, he's like, Mom, I think I did well in this area. Like I did this well, I did that well,
That's
because
cool.
he finally he went through it and then it kind of like calmed his whole nervous system. And then he was able to kind of come out through the other side and kind of back to like a different part of his brain that allowed him to see more perspective on it.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. And one thing you said earlier on is that when you went on the RNT journey, which we'll come on to shortly, but this is also linked to the question, is you've discovered another layer to emotional and stress eating. Tell us about what you discovered about yourself here.
Yeah. So a big thing that I realized was I was using food as entertainment, and that is, so I was basically, so I call this being a bored foodie, right? So like I'm bored. And so I'm turning to food as like a source of entertainment. And what that looked like for me in my life is, I practice telemedicine now. So I see patients online. And so I work from home and we live in the suburbs and I have two kids. So like I don't go out to bars, I don't go clubbing. Like my entertainment isn't like stuff like that anymore. It's like it became like going to the restaurant to eat. And like my husband, I think more so than I, really enjoys eating out. And I started to kind of adopt that habit over the years that we've been married. And he really does identify more as a foodie than I do, but I started to kind of adopt that and kind of follow in line with that. And so what we were doing was going out to eat quite a lot, like 2, 3 times a day. Sorry, 2, 3 times a week. And so, and then I think also as parents, it's like sometimes you just don't want to cook. You're like, let's just go out and eat, because like sometimes the food preparation, the cleanup, and all that stuff, you're just like, let's just go out to eat, right? And so that was a big thing that I really only came to awareness about through RNT was like, okay, like you actually need to embrace the boredom, like allow myself to be bored. And that it's okay. And it's so funny because I used to say that to my kids all the time. Like they would be like, Mom, I'm so bored. And I'm like, all right, well, it's not a problem. Like it's okay to be bored. And like actually that means like you have free time. Like right now you have free time to like, go practice the piano or go practice basketball or like draw, learn a new skill, like whatever you want to do, And so I started to tell myself that too, like, Archana, it's okay to be bored. And it means that now you have free time because most of the time in the day, I have different things scheduled and that I'm doing, and also for my family and things like that. And so I'm like, you know what? If you're bored, that means you get to put your feet up on the couch, take a nap, soak your feet, like, and, or whatever you want to do, like go for a walk. Like, so I started to just like embrace boredom. And I also started to say that, look for other ways to entertain myself besides food, like movies, like going to a show, like the theater or whatever, like anything else that it didn't always have to be about food. So I think like that was a really big one. I would say the other big one that I started to identify as emotional eating was that we can sometimes people please others by eating their food. Like for example, a big thing for me was like if my mom cooked food for me or for us, like I felt really pressured to eat it, but it was like my own self-imposed pressure. Like, I mean, like in the past, and as I went along in the RNT journey, like I got better at saying like, no, thanks, mom. Like the food looks amazing, but like, I've already eaten, or like, everyone else can enjoy it, but I'm just not eating this, right now. But like, that was like a whole new awareness too, because I was pressuring myself to eat it. Like, oh, she made it. And I also believed that that was how she expressed her love to us, is through her food and through cooking. And so that if I said no, then she would feel offended. So I had this like whole story going on in my head about like how it would play out if I said no, no, thank you. And so that was something that I had to kind of just be like, okay, well, when I try to people please her, that I'm saying yes to her, but I'm saying no to my goals, I'm saying no to my progress I want to see, And so that was like a really interesting shift that I made. And I've gotten so much better about it, like created so much more awareness about it. Yeah, I think like people pleasing is like so common for women, and like in our culture too. I think like the food is such a like big thing. Like I think a lot of our moms probably like love for us to eat their food, and we sometimes feel bad about not eating it. And so I just gave myself permission that it was okay to say no, and that I still love her, and I hope she still knows I love her, even if I said no to it.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because emotional eating is often only associated with the quote unquote negative feelings of stress, burnout, exhaustion, overwhelm. But it's actually the where people get tripped up is boredom eating. It's people pleasing eating. And these two, I always say it's usually you're stressed, you're exhausted, you're bored, or you're feeling under pressure. It's usually one of those four that most people battle with. So it's interesting that you discovered the final two during the RNT journey itself. And just on that topic, I'd love to know. I know we're darting around a bit on your journey, but if we take it to the start of your journey, let's start 2023. What was the process like for you initially in getting started with the journey, embracing the lifestyle, implementing more training into your lifestyle? Because I think that was something that was a missing part potentially. How did you find the initial process of kickstarting the journey?
Yeah, yeah. What I love was that I went all in for a year. I was like, I'm just doing this for a year. And like that in itself is a massive mindset shift because you're like, immediately, like that throws out like short term yo yo dieting, like short term fixes. Like, you're like, okay, like that's not what we're doing here. Like, we're doing something for a year. And so then I think, like, I really credit you, Akash. Like, I think that that's a really beautiful piece of like the way you set this up, because like it really is shifting you immediately into the long term. Like, you start thinking about like, okay, like what am I going to do in the long term here? And then you stop looking for like immediate like results. Like, I need to lose 5 pounds by next week, So like I think like that was a really beautiful mindset shift for me of like committing to a journey for a year. And it just was like, okay, like then I could start to embrace like, okay, it's gonna feel clunky for this first period of time, but eventually I'll get into a groove. And so I kind of just embraced the like, like, yeah, it was a little bit hard. Like, I was not used to like macro counting. I had never done macro counting before. I was not used to weighing my food, I was not used to like a lot of those things. Like, the amount of water was also like way more than I had ever drank before. And so like there was a lot of changes in the beginning. And it did take about a month to really start to get into a groove with it. Um, but like surprisingly, like I think one of the other cool things I learned was about like when you're eating like nutritiously dense food, like you actually get to eat a lot, right? Like, it was a
Mm.
lot of volume of food. And I was like, in the beginning, I was like, I can't actually get all of this into my stomach. Like, I was just so satiated. So that was kind of very interesting to experience that difference, and something I hadn't really learned much about, like eating high volume but nutrient dense foods. So that was like really interesting. The training I was doing at home initially, I had always been working out, so that wasn't like such a big change. But I think I was someone who really loved or believed that I needed a lot of variety in life, like being an emergency doc. Like, I think like that's part of the reason I chose that field, was because like it's always different. Like, every day is different. Like, even the times you go to work is different, and the types of cases you see, it's like different. And so I had to like do the opposite and just be like embrace the consistency of like what I was eating, like just and it was the initial phase is the CTP, clean your palate, I think. Clean the palate. Is that what it stands for? Um, and like for 2 weeks, basically eat the same thing. And like, I was like, can I do this? Like, is it possible? And I was shockingly surprised that I could do it. And it actually made my life easier to do it that way. And even with the workouts too, like with the trainings, I should say, lifting, like you basically do the same exercises like consistently for months. And I was so used to like, oh, I mix it up. Like, I do this and then I do that. And like just mixing up my workouts a lot. And so like that was another thing that I just really embraced, was like consistency, and started to just really like believe the notion and the thought that like the more consistent I am, the easier this journey is going to be. Like, the more consistently I just show up, then it will be easy. And the less variety I have, the easier it's going to be. And so, shockingly, oh gosh, I basically ate CTP like 90% of my journey. So I basically went like 10 months eating pretty much the same foods. Like, there's small variations along the way. And being vegetarian, like there's already just certain proteins you eat. Like, there's not a ton of, great protein options. So that was similar. The only variety really was the vegetables, the fruit I was eating. Um, so 90% of the time I like basically stuck to that. Once I finally embraced it and I was like got into a routine with it, I just decided to stick with it, and I was seeing results. So I, it was really shocking that I was able to do that, honestly.
Amazing, amazing. And if it helps, I still eat pretty much 90% of the same foods when I'm at home. It just takes one decision I don't have to make out of the day.
Yeah, the decision fatigue. I love that how you taught us about that too, because so true. Like I think as busy working professionals, like we are making so many decisions in our workday. And then as parents, there's so many decisions that we're making. That yeah, when you just simplify that, it's just like one less area that you have to make decisions around.
Amazing. So, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced through your journey, and how are you managing to juggle parenthood, so being a mom, your work as a doctor, and then obviously your work as a coach as well?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was, I had to kind of just really prioritize what I was going to do. I just really committed to this journey. I told my husband about it. And, we have kind of this interesting already arrangement around the food because, like, I'm the only vegetarian in the family. The rest are not, like, my husband and kids aren't. So, like, it had already been kind of like, I would already prepare my own food and they would eat like theirs. And so it was kind of fine that way, like to have that division of things. So that really helped. Um, Luckily, I'm a early riser. Like I once I switched to doing telemedicine, I had which I did in 2020, I had much more control over my time. So I was able to schedule like, when I was going to do my workouts. Like I have consistency now around my sleep schedule. And so I really came down to scheduling. And I know that's a big thing that you talk about, Akash, and teach us is just like scheduling things. So I scheduled all my workouts. I did meal prep. On certain days, I would just batch cook a lot of things, and that really helped. Um, and the walking was actually a little bit harder to get in, like the steps, because I live in the suburbs. Like walking isn't really built into my life. Like it's very much like you drive everywhere. And plus working from home, like it really wasn't built in. So I had to figure out a time to do that. A lot of times it was like in the afternoons as it was kind of winding down my day. And what I found was that it was a really good way to kind of have some stress relief too, just from the day of like, okay, I'm done with my work. And then I'm going to get out there and do my steps. My kids are also very active in sports. So sometimes I would like, take them to their soccer practices, for example, or football, as you call it in England, practices. And I would just walk, like while they were practicing, I would just like walk in the park, or I would, even as I was watching their games, I would like pace back and forth from like one side to the other instead of just standing there. So it took work. It takes creativity. I mean, it does take time, to do this, to do a body recomposition in this way. Like it absolutely does. Um, but it's definitely possible. And I think like just also knowing that other RNTers who were equally as busy, if not busier than me, were able to do it, that I could make it work. I think having a supportive, partner in life made it so much more doable. So I really credit my husband for being supportive and encouraging me to like do my workouts and everything like that too.
Amazing. And you did a photo shoot in November, is that right? Was it October?
Yeah, it was actually October, about 2 months ago.
Fantastic. And what's life been like since the photo shoot?
Yeah, the life has been, in many ways similar. Keep doing all of these things, like I think that the big myth, right? Like people have with weight, like losing weight or transformation is like that you get there and that you can just go back to your old way of life, which obviously you can't. Like you can't just achieve your goal and then just revert back to old patterns, right? Like in a way, like it's just basically undoing everything that you've done, right? So but what's great again about like this being a 12-month journey is like these things have become habits now for me, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm in such a great habit of like the amount of vegetables I eat is just like insane. Like I eat so much vegetables in a day. Like I'm naturally wanting to drink water a lot. Like, I mean, Like I always have a water bottle next to me. Like,
That's a serious
um,
bottle. Yeah.
it's a big one. It's as big as my head. But I always have water next to me. I'm always trying to think about like, okay, how can I get my steps in for the day? The like the workouts like just becomes like my body craves them, you know, like it's become a part of like just my routine of doing them. And it almost feels weird like when I have a rest day, like I have to like almost force myself to take the rest day. Um because like now my body has just become so used to it. And so like I think what's really beautiful about like just staying the course for so long is that it really does become a habit. Like if you're on this journey for this long and you've been showing up doing the things, like it starts to become a habit, and then they're more like on autopilot, so it doesn't take as much effort. um I will say, I love having more amount of food in my diet now compared to like right before photo shoot, right? Like you tend to drop the calories quite a bit to get that to the leanest shape. Um, and yeah, I don't have, and I really started noticing just yesterday. So it's been like 2 months, right? Like I was like, gosh, like I really don't even think about food much anymore. You
Mm,
know, like I've really lost that like it's just like to me, it's really so much more about fuel. Like I don't get excited like about like, oh, it's ice cream, you know, like I used to before. Like it was just like so much excitement, like so much looking forward to it, so much desire for it. And now it's kind of like, okay, it's just ice cream, you know, it's just a cookie. Like it's not that big a deal. And I don't notice like that I have any like excessive like food focus, you know, like I'm feeling like great throughout the day. I don't have this like, you know, thinking about food too much. And feeling, and I've also been able to maintain within 3 to 5 pounds of that checkpoint weight too. So that's been
brilliant.
awesome.
Amazing. How's the physical being the vehicle for you so far?
Yeah. So I would say a really big word for me throughout this journey was really about like self mastery. You know, like this journey was about self mastery for me and really getting to know myself at a totally deeper, new level, and trying to push myself, push my limiting beliefs and boundaries. Right. So, I mean, here's like the thing is, like, you can't outsource this. Like, you can't outsource your own physical transformation because no one can do the workouts for you, right? Nobody can do the steps for you. You could potentially have someone prep your food for you and gross. Like I use a grocery shopping service. Like I really hate going to a grocery store. So I just have like I pick up the groceries or have it delivered to the house. But like I could potentially have someone prep my food for me if I wanted to, but the workouts you can't outsource, the sleep you can't outsource, the water, the steps. So it's really something you have to do for yourself, right? And commit to yourself. And I also was really, you know, as I thought about like my genetics, for example, you know, like there's a family history of diabetes and hypertension and all these types of things. What I started to realize and what also really motivated me was like this whole concept of, and I heard this quote, and I can't remember the doctor who said it, but like they were talking about how the genetic gun is loaded, but we're the ones who pull the trigger. And so, because of epigenetics, it's really like these genes might be there, but it's our lifestyle that turns them on or off. And so that just stuck with me throughout the journey. And I was like, okay, while those genes and that predisposition might be there, like it's really like I have so much control. Like I get to control and choose all of these things as to if and when these ever get turned on, you know, the hypertension, the diabetes, and all of these things. And so I just kept really focusing in on that. Um, and that really kind of helped me, you know, really go into this self mastery and just really be like, you know, this can be a journey about so much more. It's just not just about the physical transformation, but like it's more too, because if you can master all of those things and overcome all these different levels of emotional eating, then like truly you're going to be unstoppable and be able to achieve so much else, you know, in all other arenas of life too.
I love it. Self mastery is like one of our foundation principles at RNT. So the fact that you mentioned it as one of your core words is amazing. What What almost kept you from joining about a year ago?
I guess like I wasn't sure that I would be able to have the transformations that were there, that I had seen others achieve. And it's really interesting because like when I first joined, like, at least a year ago, like you would get this like, hey, if you want to look photo shoot condition, like you're going to need to drop down to this X number weight. And the weight they gave me was like 105. And I'm 5'6". And I was like, there is no way that I'll ever be able to get down to 105 pounds. And so it's like, but you know what? It was really good because it just brought to the surface all those limiting beliefs again, too, right? And it was like, oh, like, and then and then it was an opportunity to start to address them. Like, okay, do you still believe that, you know, being of Indian descent, that this is not possible for you? Do you still believe that, like, you can't get under a certain weight, like your pre-pregnancy weight? Like, do you still believe all these things? So I had to kind of like start to address those one by one. And, I'm happy to say I actually did get down to a weight that I really didn't even think it was possible. And I got down to the weights like lower than the weight I was the day I got married 16 years ago, And so we all know, like, as a bride, most brides are like, I'm going to be in the best shape of my life on my wedding day, right? Like you do whatever it takes to get to that, like, look you want to have, right? And you get super focused and dialed in. So like, I loved the weight I was at my wedding day and thought I looked phenomenal. And I was like, after I had kids, I was like, I'll never get back there. And so not only did I get to that, I actually got 4 pounds below that. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so I think like that was like really cool and interesting. And as I was working with the RNT coaches, they were like, it's just a number. Like you don't have to have like all this attachment to it. Like just keep showing up, just keep doing the things. And your body's gonna do what it's gonna do. And like you may well get there. And like there've been other people who of your height and ethnicity and all of those things who have done it, like, and so I think like that was just really eye-opening. And I think like just having the community of people, because there's many people who would not get this journey, like in my life, if I spoke to them about it, like they're just like, what? You work out that much, you drink that much water, you do those steps, you weigh in daily, like all those things. Like they're just like, why? Like, why do you do like, so obviously those people don't get it. And so that's what's so nice about having this RNT community, because like we all get it and we're like, this is what we're doing and this is what's possible. And um, so I think like that was really awesome. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what it made me
Well,
think
the
of.
question, I guess, is off the back of that is, if your friends say, that they don't get it, I'm assuming at one stage you potentially may not have got it. What made you get it and think this is the right thing for me?
Yeah. I guess what was it that made me get it? I think like just seeing the transformations really was what it was for me. I was like, because as I mentioned at the beginning, like that just really opened my mind to like, wow, I had this limiting belief like that this was completely impossible. And like, here's transformations of people, like many of them were moms my age, like working moms, who've had these transformations. So like it is really possible. So I think like really that was it for me. And then I think like not only there's hundreds of people who you guys have helped transform. And also that there was a system there, right? Like there's a complete process to go through. And also that there's accountability and support, because I think like that had been kind of missing for me for some time, like that I didn't have the accountability of like somebody checking in on me and like making sure it's doing these things, and it's because of that. Like, I mean, I'm in week 50 of RNT and I have not missed a single workout.
Brilliant.
And I have not missed a single week of checking in. And so like I didn't always eat perfect, right? But I kept showing up and I kept trying my best. And And then, that's why I did drop like 32 pounds. I got to a weight I never thought I could get to. That's why I am feeling as great as I do now. And also why I'm continuing on for another year to continue with that accountability.
What you mentioned there, of just showing up with accountability, that's what drives the rewiring process, and really drilling in the behaviors, the habits, the mindset, and identity of someone who stays in shape year round. So thank you for sharing that sentiment, because I think it's such an important but overlooked part of it. And every week's not going to be perfect, but if you just keep showing up and talking it through, holding yourself to account, things start to slowly change internally.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, and I remember having some moments there along the way where it was tough, like I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can do this any longer, or facing different obstacles along the way, different limiting beliefs. And I remember just showing up for the calls and being supported by the coaches there, and like sometimes even crying on the calls, a few tears shed, but they always held space for me and they always supported me and were like, just keep going. You're going to get there. You're going to push past this. Like, I know you're just frustrated right now. And it was literally always when I was like at my most frustrated and I went to them, I'm like, the scale's not moving. That like literally they'll be like, it's okay, just keep going. And like literally the next day I'd like drop like a pound or something. It was always that, like at that moment where I was like, I need someone to, be my crutch for this moment and walk me through this and support me through this, that like I would get through that next level.
Amazing. So going into 2024, what are your goals then for the next stage of your journey as you go into the investment phase?
My goals really are about improving my core and core strength, about improving flexibility in my body, and just having like a really healthy like spine, really, because I think sitting at a desk a lot throughout the day, like they call it like the sitting disease, right? Like sitting at a desk and in a chair all day, for all of us who are at computers a lot, like it is really unhealthy for our bodies, right? And our spines. And so um that's been like something I just started to realize that I need to work on more, is like posture, core. So, I don't have like necessarily a huge like goal in terms of, I want to be bench pressing this amount of weight or that kind of thing. But for me, it's really about like, I'm actually going to focus more in on like Pilates and yoga and kind of lengthening my body in general, improving my flexibility while still, of course, maintaining muscle. For me, like my kind of look that I think is sort of more natural for me is really that long and lean look. And when I kind of think back to those days, like my teen years, when you're like fully grown, like 16, 17, and I was at a great weight for myself. Like it was really a long and lean kind of toned look. And that's what I want to go for.
Amazing. Any final words for the listeners, Archana?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is such a great journey for someone who's really up for it, of self-mastery, and just, as you always say, using the physical as a vehicle to grow in your own self in so many different ways. And as I said, like this can't be outsourced. Like you have to do the work yourself and show up. And it's what I actually kind of like is that it isn't a quick fix, because the thing about a quick fix is that it also leaves quickly, right? Like it doesn't last very long.
That's a good one.
And so, yeah. And so what we instead, I think like in this day and age, we almost need to do the opposite. Like stop looking for the quick fix, go for the long road, because the payoff is better. The payoff is like, delaying that gratification means that you get to have those results longer. You get to get to a lifestyle solution and hold on to those results for a lifetime. And by doing that deeper work, like you really can't skip the deeper work, because otherwise like you just rebound and you just go back to those old habits. Like you have to just do that deeper work. So take the time to do it so that you can have those results for a lifetime.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing your journey, Archana. It's been a pleasure to see you grow this year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what 2024 holds for you.
Thank you, Akash. It's been wonderful. Thanks to you and the RNT team. It's been a really great journey.